You ever notice how some houses just feel wrong? Not haunted wrong, not creaky floorboard wrong, just wrong in a way you can't put your finger on. Like the building itself is holding its breath. The Harlow family thought they knew what wrong felt like. They'd been living with it for 3 months while renovating their new home in Millbrook, Pennsylvania. A 1920s colonial with good bones, the realtor said. Character, she said. What she didn't say was that the basement had a smell. Not mold, not rot, something older. But on October 17th, they found out that their basement wasn't the problem. It was what was underneath it. David Harlow was the one who found it. He was down there replacing the ancient furnace when his sledgehammer went through the back wall and just kept going. The wall was only 4 inches thick. Behind it was nothing. Empty space, and cold air that hit his face like a gasp. His wife, Sarah, heard him calling her name from upstairs. Not yelling, calling. The way you call someone when you need a witness because you don't trust what you're seeing. When she got down there, David had already pulled away more of the wall. Behind the plaster and lath was a space about 3 feet deep, and in that space was another staircase, going down. Now here's the thing about the Harlow house. They'd seen the blueprints. They'd had 2 inspectors crawl through every inch before signing. Basements don't have basements. Not in 1920s colonials. Not in Millbrook. Not anywhere that made sense. But there it was. Stone steps, worn smooth in the center like thousands of feet had walked them, descending into darkness that their flashlight couldn't quite penetrate. Sarah remembers the temperature. She mentions it later in her statement. How the air coming up from those stairs was cold, yes, but also stale. Like it had been sealed in for decades. Like opening a tomb. Their daughter Emma, 16 years old, thought it was the coolest thing ever. Secret passage vibes, she said. Her younger brother Michael, 12, wouldn't come down to look. He stayed upstairs, and when Sarah asked him why, he said something that stuck with her. It smells like the inside of someone's mouth. Kids notice things adults explain away. David wanted to explore it immediately. Sarah wanted to call someone. The inspector, maybe the historical society, someone who could tell them what this was. But David had already started down. Just 5 steps, he said, just to see. That's when he saw the door at the bottom. Heavy wood, almost black with age. And the symbols carved into it. Not graffiti, not decoration. Symbols that looked like warnings. Symbols that looked like they were meant to keep something in, or keep someone out. The next morning, they went down together. All of them except Michael, who still refused. Sarah made him promise to stay in the living room. And something about the way he nodded, relieved, should have told her something. The staircase was narrow, 23 steps. David counted. The walls were stone, damp, and when Emma ran her fingers along them, they came away with something dark that wasn't quite dirt. Sarah's flashlight beam showed scrape marks on the walls. Recent ones, like something with claws had tried to climb up. At the bottom was the door. 8 feet tall, 3 feet wide, sealed with a lock that looked medieval. The symbols were clearer now, repeating patterns of circles within circles, and words in what David thought might be Latin. But one phrase was in English, carved deep and urgent. Never twice. Emma took a photo of it. Later, when they checked her phone, the photo would be completely black except for those 2 words, glowing white like they'd been burned into the screen. Sarah wanted to leave. She said it plain. Whatever this is, she said, it's been sealed for a reason. We should respect that. But David was already examining the lock, and Emma was already looking up Latin phrases on her phone, and the momentum of curiosity had taken over. David called a locksmith, guy named Porter, been in town 40 years. When Porter came down and saw the door, his face went gray. He recognized something. Sarah noticed. She asked him what was wrong. Porter wouldn't say much, just that he'd seen a door like this once before, in a house 3 towns over. That house burned down in '98. He asked David if he was sure he wanted it opened. When David said yes, Porter quoted an absurd price, $2,000 to open one lock. David started to argue, but Sarah interrupted. She asked Porter why the price was so high. Porter looked at her like he was deciding something. Then he said the words that Sarah still hears in her sleep. Because I'm charging you for the second lock too. The one you're gonna need after you see what's inside. He left without opening it. Just walked up those 23 steps and out of their house. And when David called him later, Porter's phone was disconnected. So David got bolt cutters. Commercial grade, from the hardware store. It took him 40 minutes to cut through the lock. The whole time he was working, Emma noticed something. Her phone kept glitching. the compass app spinning in circles, the temperature reading dropping degree by degree even though they weren't moving. When the lock finally broke, there was a sound, not from the door, from behind it, like something on the other side had been waiting and just shifted its weight. Sarah heard it clearly. So did Emma. David claimed he didn't, but Sarah saw his hand hesitate on the door handle. Then he pulled it open. The room beyond wasn't a room. Not really. It was a space that shouldn't exist. According to the blueprints, according to the ground level, according to basic physics, they were now 15 feet beneath the water table. They should have been standing in mud and groundwater. Instead, they were standing in a chamber about 30 feet square, perfectly dry, with a ceiling high enough that their flashlights didn't quite reach it. The air was different here, thicker. Sarah kept yawning, trying to pop her ears like she was in an airplane, but the pressure wouldn't equalize. Emma's voice sounded wrong, like they were speaking in a much larger space than their eyes could see. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what was in the room. Furniture, a bed, a desk, a chair, a bookshelf with books still on it. Personal items arranged like someone had been living here. Except everything was old. Not antique old, wrong old. The style was 1920s, but the decay was older. Decades of dust on objects that looked like they'd been touched yesterday. On the desk was a photograph in a wooden frame. Sarah picked it up. The photo showed a family of 4 standing in front of a house. The same house. Their house. But the photo was dated 1927, and the family in the picture. Emma saw it first. She made a sound like all the air had been punched out of her. The mother in the photograph had Sarah's face. Not similar. Identical. The same birthmark on her left cheek. The same slight crook in her nose from a childhood break. David grabbed the photo. He studied it under the flashlight. Then he pointed to the father in the picture. Same scar on his right eyebrow. Same slightly crooked left pinky that David broke in high school. The children in the photo looked like Emma and Michael. That's when they should have left. That's when every instinct they had was screaming at them to run. But they didn't, because on the desk, beneath a layer of dust, was a journal. Leather-bound, handwritten, dated. The last entry was October 17th, 1927. Exactly 97 years ago to the day. Sarah opened it. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. The first page said, "If you are reading this, then you have opened the door. I am sorry. I sealed it from the inside, hoping no one would ever have to know. But you look like us, don't you? That's how it works. It always chooses the same faces." David started reading out loud. The journal entries went back 6 months. They told the story of the previous family who'd lived here. The Caldwells. They'd been renovating too. They'd found something in the walls. Old newspapers from 1851, describing another family who'd lived here and disappeared. Newspapers from 1776, same story. A pattern stretching back centuries. Every renovation revealed the truth. Every generation found the second basement, and every family who found it changed. The journal described dreams that weren't dreams, seeing themselves from the outside, feeling memories that weren't theirs. The youngest daughter started speaking in a voice that wasn't hers, saying things she couldn't possibly know. Then the entries got worse. They described how the father, Edward Caldwell, realized what was happening. The house didn't have a second basement. The second basement had a house. Something down here was reaching up, using the building as a mouth, and feeding on the families who lived there. The final entry, written in a different handwriting, shaky and wrong, said, "I sealed the door from inside because I am not Edward anymore. I don't know what I am, but I know if someone opens this again, we will be able to finish what we started. Thank you for letting us out." When Sarah looked up from the journal, Emma was standing in the corner of the room, facing the wall, completely still. When Sarah called her name, Emma didn't respond. When she touched her shoulder, Emma turned around. She was smiling, but it wasn't Emma's smile. It was too wide. And when she spoke, her voice had an echo underneath it, like 2 people talking at once. "He's been waiting for you, Mom. He missed you so much." David pulled Emma out of the room. She fought him, not like a 16-year-old girl fights. Like something stronger was inside her, leveraging her body in ways that weren't natural. When they got her past the threshold of the door, she collapsed and started crying, saying she didn't remember going to the corner, didn't remember standing there. They ran upstairs. Michael was exactly where they'd left him, sitting on the couch, staring at the basement door. When he saw them, he said something that stopped Sarah cold. "Did you meet him yet?" They hadn't told Michael anything about what was down there. They'd been gone 20 minutes. But Michael was talking like he knew, like he'd always known. Over the next 3 days, things got worse. Emma kept losing time. She'd be in the kitchen, Then suddenly she'd be standing in her room with no memory of going upstairs. David started seeing things in mirrors, not reflections. Other rooms, other versions of their house, occupied by other families, all moving through the same spaces at different times. Sarah dove into the journal. She read every entry, cross-referenced everything with historical records at the library. The pattern was undeniable. Every 97 years, a new family moved in. Every 97 years, they found the second basement during renovations. And every 97 years, the family disappeared. Not died, disappeared. No bodies, no evidence. Just empty houses that got sold to the next family. And the cycle continued. But there was something else in the journal. Edward Caldwell had figured out part of it before he sealed himself in. The thing in the basement wasn't just feeding. It was replacing, taking families and wearing them like clothes. Living entire lifetimes in their bodies, then returning to the basement to wait for the next ones. The house was a trap, and they'd sprung it. Sarah found records of the 1851 family, the Fentons. There was a newspaper article about how they'd been acting strangely in the months before they vanished, saying things that didn't make sense. The youngest son started speaking fluent German even though he'd never learned it. The mother was found standing in the front yard at 3 a.m., not moving, not responding, just staring at her own house like she didn't recognize it. Then one morning, they were gone. The house was empty. Breakfast was still on the table. The door was locked from the inside. David didn't want to believe it. He kept saying there had to be a rational explanation. Maybe carbon monoxide. Maybe mold spores causing hallucinations. But on the fourth night, he woke up and he was standing in the second basement. He had no memory of going down there. He was just there, standing in front of the open door. And inside the room, he saw himself, not a reflection. Another David, sitting at the desk, writing in the journal, wearing clothes from 1927. The other David looked up, made eye contact, and smiled. Then he stood up and started walking toward the door. David ran. He made it up the stairs, through the basement, up to the bedroom where Sarah was sleeping. He woke her up, frantic, saying they needed to leave right now. But when they got to Emma's room, she was gone. Michael's room, empty. They found them both standing in the original basement, at the top of the stairs leading down, holding hands. When Sarah asked them what they were doing, they both turned around in perfect unison. And they both said, in that double voice echo, "We're remembering." Sarah and David made a decision. They'd reseal the door, brick it up, fill the space with concrete, anything to close it again. David called a contractor that night, paid triple for emergency work. By morning, a crew was there with concrete mix and steel. But when they went down to the second basement, the door wouldn't close. Not mechanically wouldn't close. It physically couldn't be touched by anyone except Sarah and David. The workers tried to approach it and stopped 5 feet away, confused, saying they couldn't remember what they were supposed to be doing. Emma and Michael kept disappearing and reappearing. Sarah would find Michael in the attic when she'd just seen him in the kitchen. Emma would be having a conversation about school, and her voice would drop into that echo, and she'd say something in a language Sarah didn't recognize, then snap back with no memory of it. David tried to close the door himself. He put his hands on it, tried to pull it shut. That's when he felt something on the other side. Hands. Multiple hands. All pushing back. And then he heard voices. His own voice. Sarah's voice. Emma's. Michael's. All speaking at once, saying, "Let us out. Let us finish. We've been waiting so long." The journal had one more entry Sarah hadn't read yet. The very last page, written in tiny letters like Edward was trying to hide it even from himself. It said, "I understand now. It doesn't take you. It doesn't replace you. It was you. All along. Every version. Every cycle. We're the same family, living the same life, over and over. And every time we open the door, we remember a little more of the other times. There is no escape because there is no outside. We built this prison ourselves in a time before time, and we keep walking into it because we forget why we locked ourselves in. The thing sealed down here isn't a monster. It's us. And we're opening the door because some part of us wants to remember what we did, what we are." Sarah read this while sitting in the second basement at 2 a.m., alone. She'd come down to think, to understand. And when she looked up, there were people standing in the room with her. Not strangers. Her family, but wrong versions. An Emma who looked 60 years old. A Michael with gray hair. A David whose face was exactly the same, but whose eyes were ancient. And standing in the center of them all was herself. Sarah at 90. Sarah at 50. Sarah at 30. All of them wearing the same expression. "You remember now?" they all said together. "You always remember right before you go back in." Sarah understood then. They weren't being taken. They were being completed. Every 97 years, the family didn't disappear. They stepped into the second basement and became whole again, merging with all the other versions of themselves across time. And then they'd wait, sealed away, until they forgot enough to be curious again, until they renovated again, until they opened the door again. The cycle wasn't a trap. It was a choice they kept making, over and over, because forgetting was better than remembering what they were. On October 24th, 7 days after they found the second basement, the Harlow family disappeared. The neighbors reported it when the newspapers started piling up. Police found the house empty. No signs of struggle. No evidence of where they'd gone. Breakfast dishes in the sink. Emma's phone on her bed, still charged. The front door locked from inside. In the basement, they found the hidden staircase and the open door. The police report describes the room beyond as approximately 30 feet square, containing personal effects consistent with 1920s era habitation. They cataloged everything. The furniture, the bookshelf, the photograph. But here's what's strange. The photograph they found showed the Harlow family. David, Sarah, Emma, and Michael standing in front of their house. Dated October 17th, 2024, 7 days before they disappeared. In the photograph, they're smiling. But if you look closely, really closely, you can see something else. Behind them, barely visible in the window of the house, there are faces. Multiple faces. All of them wearing the same expression. All of them looking out. The house was sold 6 months later. The new family, the Walkers, are starting renovations next week. They've got plans to update the basement, maybe turn it into a rec room for their 2 kids. The inspector said the bones are good. The realtor said it has character. Nobody mentioned the smell. But here's the thing that'll keep you up at night. I said the police found the journal, right? Edward Caldwell's journal from 1927. They read it, cataloged it, sealed it as evidence. But there was one entry they didn't include in their report. An entry on the very last page, written in fresh ink, dated October 24th, 2024. It said, "We sealed the door again. We always do. And in 97 years, we'll come back and open it again. Because we need to remember. We need to know what we are. Even if knowing means we can never leave. Even if leaving means we forget ourselves entirely. This is our purpose. This is our punishment. This is our home." And if you're watching this, if you're learning this story, ask yourself something. Have you ever walked into a room and forgotten why you went there? Have you ever lost time and couldn't account for it? Have you ever looked in a mirror and, just for a second, not recognized your own face? Because we're not the only ones with a second basement. The journal was signed with 4 names. David Harlow, Sarah Harlow, Emma Harlow, Michael Harlow. But underneath, in the same handwriting, were hundreds of other signatures. Different names, different years, going back centuries, all the way to the bottom of the page. And at the very bottom, in the oldest ink, barely legible, was one more line. Never twice, always forever. The Walkers start renovations next week. They'll find something interesting behind the furnace. They always do.